In this video, I'll be explaining exactly what I do to collect watts for rolling rods in 0.5 presses. But first, we need to clear something up, because every time I post a half a press video, I get the same comments over and over asking what it means, even though I have a whole paragraph in the description explaining it, which even starts with if you're wondering what the half an A press is. Read this before commenting to ask, but maybe what you guys need isn't a paragraph, because maybe you guys need an example. So consider Wing Mario over the rainbow. Not even the whole star. Just consider getting that for cannon platform, which is a necessary part of getting the star. So how many A presses does it take to get there? Well, if you say 0, that's wrong, because then Mario can't get far enough. If you say 1, well, it's true. What Mario can get there with 1, but we can do a little better. We can do it in half in a press. To do that, we start the level already holding A, and then we use that A press to reach the platform. Now hold on, I know what you're thinking. An A press is an A press. You can't say it's only a half. Well, TJ Henry Yoshi, hear me out. An A press actually has 3 parts to it. When A is pressed, when A is held, and when A is released. And together this forms one complete A press. Now usually, it's the pressing that's useful, because that's the only part that makes Mario jump. However, sometimes it's sufficient to just use the holding part, which allows Mario to do the little kicks. To swim in water, to fall slowly while twirling, and to fall slowly with the wing cap. And as for the release, well, there's currently no cases where that's useful. Important, so don't worry about that part now. If we map the required presses for Wing Mario over the rainbow, it would look like this. We merely need to hold A through each the cannon platform. We need to press A to launch from first cannon and need to press A again to launch from the second. So how many heat presses is that total? Well, it appears to be 3. And if we're doing this star in isolation, and yes, it would be 3. But in a full game, A button challenge run, there are other E presses that occur earlier in this run, such as the press needed to get into the course, so we take that A press into consideration. As well then, how many 8 presses would it take? The naive answer would be for 1 to enter the course and the 3 within the course that we established earlier. However, we can do better. We can actually do it in 3 by simply holding out the first A press to be used for the half A press, because the half A press only requires A to be held, not actually pressed. So in this fashion with Mario, Over the Rainbow only adds on an additional 2 A presses to run, since the first A press just leeches off a previous A press. So, to capture this phenomenon, we must call it a 2.5 A presses on a single star, the basis. You round that up to 3, but in a full game run, you round it down to 2. So in conclusion, since that first A press counts in some contexts, but adds no additional 8 presses in other contexts, we refer to it as a half A press. So, going back to the video, you can see that I start the level with the A button already held, as indicated in the bottom left corner. So, in the full game run, this A press will just leech off a previous one, and so it won't incur an additional A press. Alright, okay, Jeez Louise, glad that explanation is over and done with. Now what I am going to do in the video here, I'm using a trick called Scuttlebug transportation. You see, like most enemies, scuttlebugs have a home, which is just a point in 3D space. And they patrol a certain radius around that point. So if Mario enters that radius, they'll lunge at him to attack. But unlike most other enemies, Scuttlebug home can change positions because of a Scuttlebug bumped into Mario. The Scuttlebug's home will update to where the Scuttlebutt was when the collision occurred. So, by strategically lowering the Scuttlebug to the edge of its radius and bumping into it, we can effectively transport the Scuttlebug and its home. So that's what I'm doing. Here, note that we can't actually transport a stellar bug to outside of its native room. They actually get stuck with the door. So if you dream of Stellabugs together in one ginormous jamboree, I'm sorry, but it's dead. It's not gonna happen. But it's also worth noting that Scuttlebug will actually disappear. If they walk into a wall too far below their current home, so I do have to be careful to avoid that. It's pretty weird if you've never seen it before, but I'm pretty sure they did it so that a Scuttlebug jumps into a hole. It wouldn't just walk around down there. Anyway, I'm transporting the Scuttlebug to the corner right below the Watch for Rolling Rock star. Because next I do a trick called Scuttlebug raising. And here's how it works. On the left, I show a bird's eye view of the scene. And on the right, I show a view from the side now where Mario leaves the Rolling Rocks room. The Scuttlebug deactivates That's because the room and everything in it are only active when Mario's in the room. Mario's in the room. Mario's in the room. Or standing in a smaller region right outside the door, indicated here in yellow. So if Mario isn't in the Rolling Rocks room or in the yellow region, then the room will be completely black and everything in the room will be invisible. I said that invisibly. And won't more conveniently, this allows us to raise the Scuttlebug by performing the following steps. First, Mario enters the Scuttlebug's radius, although the Skullbug is invisible. And can't move around, it can still turn towards Mario and activate a lunge. Then Mario leaves the radius and the Skullbug returns to facing its home. Next, Mario enters the yellow region to activate the Skullbug. The Scuttlebug will perform the lunge, then that started, but cleverly we have Mario exit the yellow region right when the Skullbug is at its peak of its trajectory, thereby deactivating it so it won't fall down. And finally, since Skullbug moved past this hole, it turns around to face its home once more. Now we've gotten all the hype we could out of the Skullbug's current lunge, but that ain't no problem. Because we can just activate another lunge by repeating this procedure, activate a lunge while the Skullbug is deactivated, reactivated the Skullbug just for the upwards portion of its trajectory, and then repeat. As simple as that. So that's that I do here. And I have a second screen to show it from the Skullbug's perspective. Fortunately, the Skullbug's radius isn't a sphere, but a cylinder that extends up and down indefinitely. So, really, no matter how high the Scuttlebutt gets, we can continue to enter its area to activate its lunges and move it upwards. There's no limit to how high raise it now, it's worth noting that I only activate the Scuttlebug while I'm not inside its radius. So the Skybug will always lunge towards its home. And not towards Mario. This causes the Scuttlebug to effectively travel straight up above its home. But alternatively, I could have activated the Scuttlebug while inside of its radius, and in that case, the Scuttlebug would always lunge towards the Mario instead of towards Otoni. So it would actually make its way towards the door and then travel straight up from there. That meant it's actually a little faster because we wouldn't have to wait for the Scuttlebug to turn back towards his home. Before each activation, though, however, it wouldn't work for what we're doing, because we need the Scuttlebug to be right next to that corner. In fact, the top of that corner has a special property, which we call a misalignment. Basically, in the game's code, there's the discrepancy between the way the game handles collision, checking with the force. Versus his walls. This results in 1-1 by 1-1 union area where Mario can get under the floor without being pushed. Away by the walls, and if Mario's less than 79 units under the floor, they'll snap right down onto the floor so that they'll be important later for getting up there anyway. Now it's time to build up some speed. And I mean a lot of speed. So they get that speed. We're getting to use a trick called hyperspeed walking. And here's how it works. You probably already know. That there are some slopes in the game that are too steep to stand up. Mario just slides off them. But you know that you could actually stand on these slopes if they're submerged in shallow water. In fact, the underwater portion of these slopes has a special property. If you try running uphill on them, you'll end up running backwards at an increasing speed. With no upper bounds, but in most circumstances, this would cause us to end up in the water before Bill. Of any real speed, we can get a little more speed by running nearly parallel to the slope, but ever so slightly uphill. But eventually the slope runs out, or we move too fast around the corner. But there will always have to more you walk while staying in place. For example, if there's a wall perpendicular to the slope, then you could use that allows Mario to build up quite a bit of speed before he breaks through. However, if the wall isn't perpendicular to the slope, then we'll end up sliding down through the water. That's because the walls are really just rectangles that push Mario perpendicularly. So if Mario moves into a wall and an angle, the game will calculate that his intended next position on the wall will put us at that position on it. Then Mario ends up having an movement along the wall. Ultimately, he'll end up moving into the water. So in all hope lost, well, no hope, because Tyler came in. He figured out that he could actually make use of the game. You'll see at the bottom of the GAE as a ceiling in the game. Doesn't like putting Mario too close to the area right under the ceiling because it doesn't think it fits. So if we have Mario move backwards, it's into the ceiling. The game will choose not to move him. So we're free to build up speed in place, but not at infinite speed, because we'll end up breaking free even our speed moves past the gate. So what do we do when we need to turn to redirect the speed? There's the abundance notice that we now have enough speed so that our intended speed is past the wall and out of bounds. Hence the game doesn't like placing Mario at bounds, that doesn't move him and just lets him stay in place like in the ceiling. but unlike the ceiling, and out of bounds goes on forever. So we could essentially build up as much speed as we want without having to worry about breaking free. So now I just do that, open the gate, use the ceiling of the gate to build up some speed, and then redirect my angle out of bounds to build up the rest. Now you're probably wondering what I'm going to need all the speeds towards. After all, I do build up speed for 12 hours. But to answer that, we need to talk about parallel universes. And if you thought my other dad more complicated, well, you just wait. Okay. So Mario's position is a floating point number. It's converted to a short when the game is used to ask for collision with four triangles. In other words, Mario's position can basically be a decimal number, but it is converted to an integer between -32,768 and +32,766. So any fractional portion is truncated a number's too big or too small, or moves into this range using the modulo operator graphically. That means that the position used for floor detection is always inside of this box. So if Mario's in that box, then his actual position and the position used for floor detection are the same, albeit maybe off by a single fraction due to the truncation. But if Mario leaves that box, then his actual position and the position used for floor detection will separate, since the position used for floor detection will just loop back around to remain in the original box. So now I ask you this, there's the course if Mario is standing way over here where there's no land. But the position used for floor detection is on lands. Can he stand over here? The answer is yes, as far as the game sees it, Mario. Truly checks for land over here. So for all intents and purposes, there is essentially land over here, a copy of the original map. And this is what we call a parallel universe, or a PU. And this applies to every one of those boxes. So there's actually a grid of nearly infinite PUs here, because it's a scale diagram of the PU grid. As you can see that the PPUs are actually pretty far apart. But I'll be taking some creative liberties and drawing them closer together for the sake of clear visuals. Now, PUs aren't as glamorous as you may think. the graphics are only found on the original map, so that P-use are completely invisible. Furthermore, hues have no objects like elevators. There are item blocks, no enemies, no items like coins or stars, and not even any walls. So really, it's pretty barren. Furthermore, the N64 console will actually crash if you go into a PU and let the camera follow you. But luckily, you can avoid that crash by fixing the camera in place on the original map before leaving it through. That does make it even harder to tell what's going on in the use, so as you just saw, you could travel but it's not as simple as you might think. If you have just enough speed to reach the P, you win. You've won. Over. It won't actually work. That's because the game actually checks if Mario is above land at each quarter step of his movement. That means the simplest PU movement is moving over 4P use at once. That way each quarter step is above land, and therefore valid. For simplicity, we call this quadruple P distance 1QP. Very important detail which I now need to clear up. If I told you that distance Mario moves isn't necessarily equal to his speed. For example, look how fast Mario moves at a 31 speed on a flat slope. And now compare it to how fast he moves at the same speed on the steeper slope. In both the cases he has about the same speed, but clearly he is moving at different rates. That's because the distance Mario moves is only a portion of his actual speed. And this portion depends on the slope of the ground. The steeper the slope, the smaller the portion is. Note that this only depends on the steepness, not whether Mario is facing uphill, downhill, or sideways on the hill versus visuals. Blue will represent Mario's actual speed, and the green represents the portion that he moves, which he call Mario's de facto speed in these three pictures.
Mario has the same speed, but he has a different de facto speeds since he's standing on
on slopes with different steepnesses. So if we want to move on quo, it's not sufficient to have GQPU speed. We need QPUT facto speed, which often means our actual speed will need to be greater than 1/4 pound. To compensate, so to reiterate, we need to increase our speed until our de facto speeds sync up with 1 QP, you see, and the speed needs to do this is called the sinking speed. So in this diagram here, the blue arrow represents the sinking speed. When we have that speed, the quarter steps to the de facto, speeds sync up with the P use. And we can move now. What I'm showing here is just the lowest or first sinking speed, Akaka, the speed to move exactly 1 quip. If we increase our speed, eventually our de facto speed would sync up again when it covers the distance of 2 GPU. Be able to move at that speed, which is times 2 as fast as before. So in general, any multiple of the lowest sinking speed is itself a sinking speed, and will cover multiple gross domestic PUs at once. So remember, kids, every slope has a different set of sinking speeds, and this can make routing tricky. For example, in the video where I do PU movement to reach the quarter aquarium, I had to traverse several different slopes. First, this slope. That I used hyperspeed walk, and then this slope at the edge of the water, then the flat ground of the castle fold, yeah. And then the castle stairs, which is really a steep ramp, and then the flat ground of the stairs. Note that the stairs you see there are the actual stairs and not a ramp. So they're just the flat grounds here in the graph showing the sinking speeds for each of these slopes, and these are the speeds I need to in order to have PU movement while standing on each of these slopes. Naturally, the steeper the slopes have greater sinking speeds. Now keep in mind that I can only build up speed while I'm on the hyperspeed walking slope. Once I leave it, I can't generate any more speed, so my speed will only decrease from there. So to successfully perform this PU out, I better have generated enough speed to reach slope sink speed in turn. For example, let's say I build up enough speed to reach the first possible sinking speed, and then I use that to go to the next slope, and then I could let my speed drop until I reach the slope sinking speed. Go to the next slope and let my speed drop again until I reach the slope striking speed. But go to the next slope, but then I have a bit of a problem. I have less than the required sinking speed and no way to gain any more. So this is the route that is impossible, well no, because these are just slopes first, sinking speeds, but remember any multiplicity of these will work as well. So now let's factor in each slope sinking second speed, as well as these speeds allow Mario to move to the Q, P, U at once instead of one. So now, if I instead build up enough speed to reach the second sinking speed of that first slope, then I'll actually have enough speed to reach that sinking speed and turn and complete the route. And if that don't work, we could have considered each slope's third sinking speed, and so on. Until we did get it to work, however, which sinking speed we need to reach initially is kind of a big deal, because reaching that first sinking speed takes about 12 hours. And reaching that second sinking speed takes about 25 hours. So if there's a way to use a lower sinking speed initially, then that's a 12-hour save. So how much speed will we need to generate for the Watch for Rolling Rockstar? Well, keep in mind that even with access to unlimited horizontal speed, we don't have any improved vertical mobility. So to get to the top of the course, we need to travel up slopes and ride up elevators. So this will be the basic route. Start on the hyper-speed walking slope. Navigate along the path up from that lake, ride up this elevator ride, up this other elevator, make your way onto the amazing emergency exit platform, which is the highest point we could reach. And then launch to the Watch for Rolling Rocks platform. By itself, that still won't be enough height, but the Scuttlebug weak positions will provide the extra bounce we need. So this is the graph of the sinking speeds of these slopes. Unfortunately, we run into a bit of an issue with the path up from the lake. That area is actually made up of dozens of floor triangles that each have different slopes, but that didn't stop me after careful observation and scrutiny. I isolated 6 triangles, which I named T1 through T6. These triangles have strictly decreasing steepness, so we can meet each of their sinking speeds in turn. Additionally, their heights span the entire vertical distance we need to cover to go from bottom to top without leaving any gaps in between. So by using the slopes of these 6 triangles, we can complete the blueprint of our route, allowing us to utilize the first sinking speed of that initial slope. So building up speed only takes 12 hours instead of 25. Now, we're almost ready to go back to the video, but there's just some final points I want to make. For example, you don't need to have exactly the sinking speed to traverse B use if you have slightly less than the sinking speed. You'll move relatively forwards in the map. If you have slightly more than the sinking speed, relatively backwards. And in the further you deviate from the sinking speed, the greater this relative movement will be. Additionally, if you adjust your angle slightly away from the cardinal direction, you can move relatively sideways, but keep in mind that even the smallest possible angle deviation will be magnified over the QP of distance, and thus Mario will be sent multiple feet to the side. Now, based off what I told you, you might think that you could only travel multiples of 4p use at a time, but that's not exactly true. For example, if one of those quarter steps is out of bounds or over ceiling, then the quarter step will be invalid, and since Mario moves up but do not including the first valid in quarter step, he could in fact end up stopping permanently at one of the quarter steps separately. If you change slopes during a quarter step, the speed will change, and you'll alter the distance of the next quarter step. And so, most likely, it will no longer sync up with a parallel universe, and you'll end up stopping on the new slope. Finally, for simplicity, the set of P-use that are multiples of 4 away. We call the OP-U grid, and if Mario's on the quarter pound U grid, then we say he's quarter pound U aligned, remembering moving a multiple. 4 to use is easy, but moving a different amount required special conditions like added bounds or charging slopes. So if you're quarter pound, U aligns. It's easy to stay that way, and your quarter pound, you misaligned. It's easy to stay that way as well. You know it's you became quarter pound, you misaligned. You need to react in order to return in the main map, but it can be difficult if you're not near at bounds, and if your sequence of slope changes is predetermined. So, managing your quarter pound U alignment is one of the many challenges of planning a PU route. Okay, so now we're finally ready to resume the main video and watch the PU movement. Just kidding. First, I need to explain what these screens are. These extra screens will help you follow along during the PU movement. The standard view. It's just a view that the game shows, but since I fixed the camera on the main map, To prevent the game from crashing, this screen won't tell you very much. The relative view shows where I am, and each to you, this is what it would look like if I let the camera follow Mario. And if P-use weren't invisible, the relative map also shows where I am in each view, but from an overhead perspective. And finally, the PU map shows where I am in the PU grid. Okay, so now let's really start. So as I explained earlier, I navigate up the path from the lake using the 6 triangles I isolated, and I marked them in the relative map so you can follow along. So basically, I get onto a triangle and let my speed draw until I'm around the sinking speed for that triangle slope. Until then, navigate uphill on the triangle, then the move to the next triangle. Using that I taught you, you should be able to follow along with my movement. For example, I am able to move relatively backwards because I have slightly more than the sinking speed. Triangle to triangle, my QPU alignment changes, but cleverly I planned it in such a way that they would all cancel out by the end. And that's actually the reason why I've been holding A this entire time. By holding A, I can press B to do those little kicks. To gain precious height. Okay, so now we're closing in on the end of the final movement. I will be a kick onto the amazing emergency exit platform. continuously position myself in the correct relative part of the map to make the movement work okay. Now don't blink. And there we go. By bouncing on the Scuttlebug in ground pounding in the misalignment, I achieved just enough height to get to the Rolling Rocks platform. Here I show an abridged version of the Scuttlebug raising in case earlier. Viewing was too choppy to follow. As you can see, the Scuttlebug moves back and forth above its home, and at the end you can see I do 2 special raisings purely to move him sideways and closer to the corner, since he ended up being too far away for the bounce to work. And here I show an alternative angle of the final view. Movement in the Scuttlebug actually became active once I entered the PPU version of this room. So I really only had a handful of frames to get over there. Here before he fell too far, and there you have it. Watch for Rolling Rocks, done in 0.5 A presses, man. I did not expect this video to become an hour and 5 minutes long when I started avant-garding, but I guess there was just that much content. Hopefully, you were able to stomach along with my piano and stolen visuals and experience something new and had an enjoyable experience. So,